Good evening and greetings from Abu Dhabi, the UAE. I have two distinguished guests today on the program, Dr. Peter Aiken and Todd
Harbour, like Pearl Harbor.
Harbour, yeah. I was thinking Harbour. I was just thinking about it. That's why I paused. Sorry about that, Todd. And
no problem.
So what we wanted to do today is talk to you about your book. I think it's a really amazing information age, but yet when it comes to information and data literacy, are we there? So please, gentlemen, enlighten us and tell us about your vision, your thoughts, and your insights on this topic. So, of course, the book's title is called Data Literacy, but, you know, the audience, even people who are data professionals, don't really know very much about this because, to be quite honest, it's a topic that's kind of just come into, you know, the forefront of mass media. So if we look at data literacy and people would ask you, why is data literacy important? Can you kind of tell us, you know, based on the chapter in your book that's called Data Illiterate Society, what's your opinion about the society's level of literacy? And also, why is it important to be data literate?
Todd, do you want to go first?
I was just going to say the same thing, Peter. How about you go first?
So we've both been working in the area of data for many, many years. And this is the third book that Todd and I have co-authored together. So we just kind of kept running into a frustration, first of all, that we were preaching to the choir. And while there's nothing wrong, it's very comfortable to preach to the choir. The real element of this is a societal one. And that's the angle we took in the book. I forget whether Todd came up with the term, but I think it was Todd came up with this term, perpetual involuntary data donor. If you don't know much about data, you will be a PID. In fact, you probably already are a PID. And what that means is you are very much like the batteries in the matrix. Those would be the human beings that were supplying all of the energy for the machines to get their stuff. And it turns out there's an industry currently called surveillance capitalism that is designed to do exactly the same thing, with the small exception that they're not sticking electrodes in us at this point in time and doing this. And Todd, I've been in the academic world working in the private sector. You've been in the private sector working in the academic world, but from the private sector, I don't think you see a whole lot of improvement, do you?
No, we see very similar things. And, you know, one of the things that struck us is when you step back and you just look at how the term or how the phrase data literacy is used today. Like many other things in the data space, there's no common definition. If you were to go talk to folks who come from an engineering background, they'll have their own definition of really what a data literate person is, and they're really referring to, you know, the ability and knowledge of using different tools and technologies to largely process and exploit data. And when Peter and I started, you know, literally just talking over coffee and considering this topic, you know, we quickly came to the common understanding that society as a whole really needs to have a much better grasp about what's going on. And I think Peter would agree with me that we're starting to see a stratification of people who are data literate. They understand the technology, the application and use of the data, and those who aren't. And it's a pretty frightening thing when you look at what's happening behind the scenes. So we chose this perspective to kind of raise awareness, maybe a little bit of call to arms, and just put some information and ideas out there that I think others should review and critique, for good or for bad.
Right. I mean, that's a really interesting point that you bring up about data literacy within the perspective of the larger society, like civilization. Because I think, you know, being a data person, among ourselves, we're talking about, you know, our profession and you know, making your own skill set deeper, more richer, so that you can contribute to organizations or governments, whatever it is. But the angle that you both have chosen in this book is actually not really solely pointed to data professionals. It's really pointed to the society at large. So that's a really big, let's say, challenge that you've taken on, which I personally find really refreshing. I mean, if we look at the second question, there's this concept about levels of literacy, or, you know, different types. Can you talk to the audience a little bit about that? What do you mean?
So the real interesting thing is when you do a literature review to see what other people have written about this topic, first of all, it is mainly data people trying to talk to other people. And the arguments are about whether you need 5 years of statistics to be a data scientist or 10 years of statistics to be a data scientist. And those are good discussions, and we should absolutely have them, but they simply won't move the needle. And in order to move the needle, we have to hit the 1.5 billion knowledge workers out there, because that really is the definition of a knowledge worker. All knowledge workers work with data. And if they don't know how to do that, then they become less productive as knowledge workers and more vulnerable as citizens.
Right, right. And that's something that's really interesting, because you're talking about two worlds that need to coincide, like they need to coexist. And there needs to be development in both of those worlds. So let's go back to the citizen world again, or the larger picture. So there was a question here about what is this related, how is this relate to Internet of Things? But I want to put it in the perspective of the fact that the two of you wrote this book, and you said that to the audience, your data is someone else's asset. What do you mean? Because I think most people would think, my data, you know, I have data. I mean, so please explain this concept. And why would you say that? And how does even the Internet of Things, you know, spin into this? Should I point it now to Todd?
I feel Peter's finger coming in my direction on this one. So the way I like to think of, I'm happy to kick it off, and then Peter can he can add or delete or whatever he feels comfortable doing. But you know, when we talk about the Internet of Things, if you're talking to technical people, there's always a lot of talk about IPv6, larger addressable namespaces, and all of these wonderful things. And really what has begun to happen now at a practical level is anything electric is now a candidate to connect to a network.
Yeah.
And as such, it becomes a source of information. And a lot of these things are totally benign. If you want to count the number of pieces of bread that your toaster has made, you know, there's an app for that. Or if you want to, you know, monitor your goldfish in your tank, there's an app for that too. But what's also happened is that when you step back and you look at all of these sources of information in the aggregate, they have value. They have value to society. They have value to individuals. Well, the same thing is happening to us. And some thought leaders have been saying for a long time that you and I are now the products.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happens. I mean, the wearable technologies are now describing us as people in our behaviors and how we interact with one another. Everything that's valuable is now monitored and metered in real time. Right. And, you know, the way I think about it, this others may have a different opinion, is if I talk to my wife and I ask her where her 401k is, she knows exactly where it is. She can tell me exactly how much money is in it. She can tell me everything about it. If I ask her about some present that her mother gave her, she knows exactly where it is. It's in her bedstand next to her bed. And the point is, she values it. Therefore, she monitors and meters it. And the same thing is happening as a result of IoT, and it's happening to you and me as things that are now monitored and measured. And that may be a good thing or bad thing relative
depending
to society.
on what it is. Yeah, depending on what it is. I really love being in discovering different industries. I find it fascinating, all the different contexts and stories, and being a data chick, I love seeing that data can make such a big impact all over the place. It's wonderful. It's not all bad. You can do good.
That's right.
Data. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Althea.